And joining us on the line, it's great to welcome back to Flow, Andrew Farriss. G'day, Andrew. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Clayton. How's things?
Doing all right myself. What about you? How's it going on the farm at the moment? I know the listeners right across the Flow region will be curious to know how the crops are looking and how the cattle's going at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's thank you for asking. And I think for all the people out here in the northwest New South Wales and most of the district, we're having a really, really amazing season, and thank God for that. And I've certainly got nothing to complain about. We came out of a terrible drought.
Yeah.
We were all experiencing, I think, in our areas, and we've come out of that and into something good, which is ironic given that at the same time everyone's trying to claw their way out of the pandemic. So, we count our blessings, let's put it that way.
Very much so. I understand that. And yeah, much the same around here. The crops are looking good, and I'm enjoying seeing the yellow canola fields on the drive into the Flow studios. So it's good. There's positivity out there despite all that negative COVID thing. There is some positivity out there, especially with our farmers, and I'm glad it's going for you as well. And how you've survived through COVID. You're doing okay despite all the lockdowns and that?
Yeah, so far so good. I've actually turned I stopped touring for a while because it simply became impossible.
Yeah.
And for obvious reasons, and because the borders kept shutting, and et cetera. But I stopped being frustrated about that and changed my mind. I started working on creative ideas, and also I was approached by an artist from northeast Arnhem Land. His name's Yirmal, and he's connected with the Otayindi people, and I produced records for them quite a long time ago now, but one in particular, Gama, for the Gama Festival, that's held annually up there, when they can, of course.
Yeah. And
one of the people approached me, which is Yirmal, and so I actually have been producing an album for Yirmal, which I'm quite excited about. I think for him it sounds fantastic.
Okay, looking forward to hearing that. One thing before we talk about your song, Son of a Gun, I want to ask you about, you did a live at Studio 301 for your EP that I was watching last year, and my favourite song of yours is First Man on Earth. I just absolutely love it, cannot get enough of it, and I just love the version you had on that. I just wanted to say thanks for that, because that was absolutely brilliant, and if folks haven't seen it, they need to go to your website and have a look at it. It is absolutely amazing, especially that particular song, so just wanted to pass on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I got really good feedback about it at the time. I don't know, I really, really do appreciate that. In today's digital world, you wonder if anyone remembers anything, because it's all coming at you so fast from every different direction. And for you to say that, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I just love that song, and I'll go home and listen to it. It's on a little loop. I've got it in the car as well, so I just absolutely love it. Now, your new song that we're going to be talking about, Son of a Gun, from your album, it's out at the moment. And I'm just wondering about the inspiration for it. Did we sit down and watch a weekend of John Wayne westerns and all that sort of thing, and the Man with No Name and the Clint Eastwood ones? It just feels like I'm just been immersed in those old western movies that I grew up watching as a kid.
Yeah, I sort of wandered into that area kind of by mistake, in a sense. I didn't exactly start out doing that. What happened was with Son of a Gun, which is that's right, the single I got out now. First of all, I had written the music a while before, but I hadn't finished. I had the melody, but I wasn't happy with the lyric. And then when I began to realize that what kind of an album I could make, and I started to make, I purpose wrote that song and another particular song called My Cajun Girl, another one called Hummingbird. I purpose wrote them for the album.
Yep.
And even though that may sound strange, in many ways, I don't think I'm too dissimilar to a lot of songwriters where I'll write a song, but I won't necessarily write it for an album, if you know what I mean. I'll just write the song because I like the song, But Son of a Gun, I purpose wrote, and it's basically a fictitious story about a guy set in older times. Yeah, it could be the Old West, like a Western, I guess, and the idea is he thinks he can solve all his problems with a gun, and it doesn't have a good ending for him, And sadly, that still happens today.
It does. It also, when I was watching it just a series that my wife and I watched on one of the streaming services, Yellowstone, with Kevin Costner. It was, and I said to her, I said, watch this clip and listen to this song. This would fit into that show perfectly. And so I don't know whether you want to reach out to their producers with your music, because it just fits. It really does.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that too. It's funny you should mention that, because ironically, just before COVID kicked in, I was actually in Nashville, and I was about to start promoting what I'm doing over there. And one of the, I won't say who, but one of the senior people that's very high up in television there had actually said that to me, that she thought it would be great for Yellowstone. But then COVID took over absolutely everything in our world. And I had to, like everybody else, sort of change my plans. But that's life, Life has ebb and flow like that, and it's a roller coaster, Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. It's life.
Well, Season 4 is starting soon, and I believe it got renewed for Season 5, so I'll just mention that as we pass by. Are you a fan of Westerns at all? Did you ever watch them growing up?
Yeah, I am. I particularly, I like the Westerns that don't always have a happy ending, and some of the Westerns, like you're right, like the Cowboys, the John Wayne film. It's just a great film about an older guy, and he, takes all the kids out on a cattle drive and that sort of thing, and just, I don't know, as time moves along, and especially, that was one of the inspirations for me too, with making my album the way I did and recording it and the lyrics and everything, was I love a lot of modern country music, country pop or whatever. At the same time, I think a lot of it is gone away from our heartland and the roots and upbringing of some country music. Like what inspired people like Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash and people like that were cowboy type ideas. The idea of freedom, the idea of being able to ride around on a horse, and the idea of, these kind of concepts are sort of more urbanized, Do you know what I mean? Like it's about trucks and machines and whatever it's about, which is great, but I also wanted to explore what was life like before electricity. What was it like playing music back then? They didn't have recordings. They just played live all the time. There was no computers. There was, and you still sat around a campfire and played your songs.
That's one of the things that I remember as a kid, going away camping with my grandparents and my uncle, and that's what you do. You would sit there and he would pull out his guitar, and it allegedly had 6 strings on it, but at the time it only had 3. But he would still play a little tune, and we'd sort of laugh, and I had no idea what they were singing, but I was just in the moment, and that's, around a little campfire, and I remember those moments as a kid, and it's interesting that you say that with there was no electricity back then when we went out camping.
Well, that's right, you make a fire. And but I was going to say as well, I've always been a songwriter. For anyone that knows who I am and my background and all the work I did with InXS, and for many other people too as a songwriter, all those years I spent doing all that. The irony of it is, as we're talking to each other about, pre-electricity and whatever, is that I actually used a lot of technology 30 years ago that's the same things that people are doing now. I mean, like loops and samples and sophisticated kind of programs, but they were just in their infancy. But I learned a lot doing all that. And as a sort of, when I go to write songs, I don't always think about technology. I just think, if it doesn't need technology, I won't put it in there. And if it does, I might use it. But they're just tools. It's like if you go out to your truck and you've got a toolbox in there, the electronic part of it is just a tool. It's not, like I'd much rather play with a live musician than play with my computer. Yeah.
So you're not getting sort of bogged down in the technology. It's there as to assist and part of the end result if it's needed.
Exactly. It's just a tool, and a great tool and very, very sophisticated. But, some things sort of never change really. And I think also the old instrument makers and people who really were, brilliantly clever at making some of the old instruments and the sounds of those instruments. You can sample them all day long, but there's nothing like playing them and hearing them in real time.
So do you, to come up with your melodies that you're hearing in your head, do you use your guitar or use a piano, or what do you use to get them out so that?
Clayton, I've worked sort of every direction, if you like, as a songwriter. I mean, I've written on my own a lot. I've written with other people a lot, girls and guys or whatever, and different countries and sometimes different music genres. And this time, for me, it's been country rock, country folk, and sometimes I'll start with a chords. Other times I'll start with a melody, and not necessarily a vocal melody. Other times there will be a vocal melody. Sometimes it's a lyric, and it depends what's inspiring me, like at the time. And I figure, and I've learnt this for many years of doing what I do. I think if I like what I'm doing, and I think it's good, there's a good chance someone else might like it.
Yep. As in your song First Man on Earth, I absolutely love it, and I'll plug that again.
Yeah, cool. Well, I actually co-wrote that with Guy Chambers, who wrote a lot of the big massive hits with and for Robbie Williams. I wrote that with him in London, actually.
Yes, I remember you telling me all about that because it took me back to some prog rock era stuff, but I just love it. I just want to ask you about the video that you've done for Son of a Gun, and I love the hat that you're wearing in the clip. And looking at it, was this filmed on your farm as well?
Yeah, the video, you mean in the wool shed there?
Yeah,
actually a neighbour's wool shed.
They cleaned it up for you because it looks very nice.
Yeah, well, actually, funnily enough, out here we actually like to keep our, wherever possible, we like to keep our, how can I put it, our shit together. Can I use that phrase? No, we do. We don't. We're not sloppy. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And also, especially with anything to do with industrial or mechanical, sort of workshops, areas where you've got to work with what can potentially be dangerous instruments or tools. You want to keep them clean. You want to keep things tidy because it's safe.
Yep. I'm just watching you hammer the wanted poster up on the tree there. So.
Yeah, that's me and Laurie Minson. He's a bit of a legend out of Tamworth for country music. He's played with just about everybody. Loz looks badass in that video, I've got to say.
The other scenes of the young lad riding, was that filmed on your farm, or where was that done? Was that the bit that was done in Arizona?
No, that was, hang on. That was done out on the property here.
Yep.
But there's some local jackaroos and jillaroos and people who work out on horses, and they muster, professionally in that, and they're our friends and their families are our friends.
Wow.
And they all said, yeah, we want to be in that, and I think they have a bit of fun with it, and they go down to the pub and they'll laugh at each other, and it's been good. I think it's been, I feel really fortunate because when I first started all this, I said to Marlena, my wife, I said, I don't think I could have done all this in the city if I lived in the city. Where am I going to find all this to do all this? Because a lot of people say, where do you do all this stuff? Where'd you get that? Where'd you get that? And I'm like, I'll go next door.
Yeah. Yes, I can understand that. Yeah, you just need some help, and so often when I'm talking to artists, that's what they say with their video clips, especially over the last 12, 18 months, that friends have suddenly made appearances in them because that's just the way it's been had to be done. So your friends, you just go next door. Just speaking of the younger artists that I quite often speak to, Andrew, I just from your, you've been in the business, you're an elder statesman, for want of a nicer way of saying it. I speak to some of them at the moment, and they're feeling a little frustrated, as you said you were before, without the ability to tour and that. What sort of advice, can you pass on to them, and words of wisdom, I guess, that could keep them inspired to want to keep going, which I know they want to do, but they just feel a bit down on. I've just spoken to a couple of late that have just sort of touched me a bit, so I'm just sort of wondering what advice could you pass on to them?
I don't know. Someone gave me advice a long time ago when I was struggling a little bit in my life, and that was, if you're going through hell, keep going, or you might get stuck there.
Yeah.
And the other little bit of advice, my dad always said, when you're giving advice, keep it brief. But it's just if your plan isn't going exactly the way that you want it to, make a new plan and be prepared to be flexible.
Very, very wise, I feel. Yes, flexibility is a key at the moment. We all need to be flexible. And you mentioned that. On your website, andrewfarriss.com, I'm looking at the merchandise section, and I enjoy seeing the shot glass. Don't often get to see that on someone's merch.
Well, if you do enough of them, you won't be able to see it anymore.
Yeah, we've been there.
And I take no responsibility for that either. That's a personal choice, of course.
And what's coming up next week? You've got the song out at the moment. Things start to loosen up. Will you get out on the road, or what's
mate, I'd love to. Look, I feel bad as it is because right about the time we were headed towards, South Australia, Victoria, and Western Australia, and we just couldn't. We couldn't because everything just got crazy earlier on this year, and we just stopped. And I don't know what to tell everybody. But if our borders can open up again and we can go back to something approaching normal, then I'd love to do that.
And we look forward to seeing you should that happen as well. Andrew, it has been fabulous chatting to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us once again on Flow. I could just keep talking more, but I know you've got things to do. You've got that big property to look after. We've got your new song here ready to go. If you could please introduce it for all our Flow listeners, and thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Sure. You're listening to Andrew Farriss talking to Clayton Bester on Flow FM Network, and this is my new single, Son of a Gun.
You were riding hard across stony ground with the price upon your head. Sheriff got your name up on his wall. You better ride on or you're gonna fall. Of those crazy nights, whiskey, wild women starting dive bar fights. Sheriff's gonna get you, gonna hunt you down if you don't surrender, young son of a gun. Young son of a gun. Son of a gun, son of a gun. A pretty girl with an ugly heart, she stole your soul on a moonlit night. A head full of whiskey, couldn't see the light. The hard rain's tumbling down. Now listen to the wind calling out your name. This ain't no joke anymore.